I mean to say there's so many things that we do alike. Buy books at the same time with the same books. Knit a jumper and alter the pattern at the same time. Cook the same meal.
Try to make it on our own. Our dreams are bound to come undone.
But what about the time when Diane came into the kitchen one time and you were standing there and she walked over and put her arms around you and said, "How you doing, honey?" And yeah, she thought it was me.
Your dreams do mine. See how high we can climb.
I always wonder whether we were switched at birth, you know, whether I'm... Yeah, I often wonder if I was born Claire or now.
Leave the world behind if you'll tie your dreams to mine.
Twinsburg, USA, where twins from all over the world come to join in the annual Twin Parade, to see and be seen. Twins are not just a genetic aberration, they're nature's own laboratory. The study of twins is now at the heart of a new scientific understanding of why we are and what we are. The more we learn about them, the more we learn about ourselves.
It's just very peculiar to see two people who are genetically identical. They're really clones of one another. When we talk about clones, they're with us now. 1 out of 300 births are identical twins, and it is striking how similar they are, certainly physically, but then when you get to know them, behaviorally as well. They're exciting because they hit us over the head with the importance of genetic influence. For me, what's most exciting is that twins provide a natural experiment to separate nature and nurture, that is, nature, genetics, and nurture, environment, in asking whether or not individual differences that we see among children or adults is influenced by genetic factors.
The scientific study of twins rests on one basic proposition. Genes are plans for life's building blocks. Identical twins have identical genes, and so any differences between them should be environmental in origin. The environment means everything from family to how people behave towards us. By comparing identical and non-identical twins, who only have half their genes in common, scientists can begin to sort out the relative effects of our genes and environment. And the results are astonishing.
For the last 25 years, behaviour geneticists have looked at a very wide range of human behaviours, starting with things like intelligence, cognitive behaviour, personality, psychiatric symptoms of anxiety and depression.
Political attitudes, where you stand on the left-right continuum, for example. That's very strongly influenced by your genes.
Habits like smoking and drinking, drug taking.
Whether you are the sort of person who believes in a religious code or not, that also is influenced by the genes.
And in all of these cases, what has been found is that identical twins tend to be much more similar in their behaviour than non-identical twins, suggesting that genetic factors are very important.
The new findings are raising fundamental questions about the nature of human behaviour. Questions with far-reaching social and political implications. The strangeness of twinning starts in the womb. New ultrasound techniques show that conceiving twins, not singletons, may be the norm.
Recent evidence suggests that most conceptions involve twins, so most of us actually are twins, but our twins didn't make it usually past the first few hours or days or certainly weeks of life. Very few survive.
This phenomenon is called the vanishing twin. In this scan at 7 weeks, twins can be seen, but a month later, one has disappeared. Doctors believe it dies and the cells are absorbed back into the mother's body. But the vanishing twin is not the only extraordinary aspect of life in the womb. Diane Older is 31 and is 14 weeks pregnant. She and her twins are being examined by Neil Sabir, who manages twin pregnancies, and Alessandra Piontelli, an Italian psychoanalyst who studies their development as children.
So twins in general obviously can be identical or non-identical. Sure. So the non-identical twins are simply two eggs that got fertilised at the same time, and they happen to be in the womb at the same time. They're no more alike really than two people, brothers and sisters, and it's just like two people sharing the same flat. They just happen to be there at the same time.
Doctors are aware that a mother's behaviour during pregnancy affects the fetus. The damage caused by cigarettes, alcohol or drugs is well known. What is emerging is that conditions in the womb itself also have an effect. Most of us are alone there, but what happens if two people are crammed into a room meant for one?
One way of thinking about it is that when you get identical twins, obviously it's one egg and one sperm which fertilise, and then the early embryo splits into two. But it doesn't split equally, and it's a bit like when you imagine when you pull a Christmas cracker. Although it starts off, it never splits exactly in half. One person gets more than the other. It's exactly the same in this type of twins.
With the placenta, you never get 50-50, you know. No. They're not very crowded.
Not crowded, and the other thing that can happen in this type of twins, if the sharing of the placenta becomes unequal, is that one baby can end up not having much space to move around in.
And much fluid.
The battle for maternal resources starts early. Alessandra Piontelli has followed a series of twins from the womb to toddlerhood, taping the various stages. Here, at 13 weeks, the upper twin is squeezed into a corner. His brother is enjoying the advantages of a spacious amniotic sac. Filippo and Pietro were one of the pairs she studied. In the womb, Filippo was more active and Pietro was squashed. It's too soon to draw firm conclusions, but Piontelli thinks this may account for their different temperaments, one bold, the other nervous.
You can see the left one, Filippo, who is signalling to his brother, and the other one on his right is looking at him. Filippo is even smiling. Pietro cries and withdraws.
11 months on, and those characteristics are still clear.
The mother is introducing a new object, which is this sponge, and you can see Filippo approaching it with great confidence. You know, he plays with it. He doesn't seem at all intimidated by it. You can see Pietro already beginning to look at it with a suspicious look. He pushes it away.
The boys' genes are identical, so their differences in temperament must be due to the environment, their different experiences in the womb. At 15 months, that's still easily observed.
They have a very noisy shoe cleaning machine in the house, and you can see Filippo playing with it absolutely at ease, whilst Pietro withdraws continuously from it, whilst at the same time watching his brother and what he's doing. He approaches it, but he never touches it.
However, although the environment is critical in the first few years of life, the genetic pendulum soon swings back.
The remarkable thing about humans is how resilient they are to these sort of intrauterine insults, that they seem to bounce back despite the fact that they had a rough time during pregnancy, and the deficits seem largely to be overcome, you know, by early childhood. And from then on, one is looking at the effects of genes making identical twins more similar than non-identical twins, both in physical characteristics and in behavioural characteristics.
One thing that's very important to realize is that when we talk about the results of twin studies that point to genetic influence, it's very important to make sure that people don't interpret that to mean that we're genetically programmed. There are genetic influences, but they are just influences. You know, the word means to flow into. They're not deterministic. They're just flowing into who a person is.
As twins researchers advance, scientists have been able to unravel these influences. Some are much stronger than others. The research shows that our sexual drive, and when it kicks in, has a strong genetic component. But interestingly, the way we live our sex lives does not. Typical of this extraordinary phenomenon are Kathy and Claire Craven. Identical twins, both living in London, both graduates, both pop music promoters.
Our boyfriend life is very different. Also, you're a lot more long-term than me. I mean, I'd like to be long-term. I'd like to have boyfriends for longer, but Claire always seems to keep them for longer. Yeah, I usually have, like, you know, fewer long-term boyfriends, and Kathy usually has several short-term boyfriends. Not at the same time. No, I mean several as in one after the other. Yeah. with maybe a little overlap.
It's hard to talk about these things in anything like scientific terms, but what kind of romantic relationship we fall into? Do we love the fireworks of one-night stands and getting to know people, and that's what really turns us on in terms of romance? Or do we like, you know, steady and slow friendships that develop more romantically and monogamously? So people do differ in their romantic styles or love relationships. Love styles, I suppose you could call it. Identical twins are no more similar than fraternal twins. And this is exciting in a kind of convoluted way because it suggests no genetic influence.
As Cathy and Claire are identical, their differences have to be explained by something in their upbringing. Could it be the family or the way they were treated by their parents?
Our parents were very fair to each of us. We were always treated the same way. Definitely. Neither of us was given any preference over the other. No. Although we did try and sort of push it. We used to kind of say, you love me more than you love Cathy, don't you, Mum? But it was only jest, it was only sort of a little sort of game, wasn't it?
So if their early lives and their family were so similar, what can have happened developmentally in their environment to put them on different tracks with men?
Maybe it's because as a kid, I thought she was always the better looking one. And also, when we were younger, I was always told that I looked like my brother. I didn't consider my brother to be pretty. And then just as we got older, unfair, unkind people used to say, well, Cathy's better looking than you. So it kind of made me more reserved. It was almost soul-destroying at discos when you're 14, 15. And guys would walk up to me and say, are you Cathy or Claire? And I would say, Claire, and they'd walk away. Because they'd know that Cathy was more outgoing and they'd probably have more chance with Cathy. What do you mean more chance? Well, you were always more outgoing, so you were always sort of more accommodating. Yeah. And I used to get very jealous of it, and I used to even think, you know, maybe I should just say I'm Cathy next time. You know, just for a dance.
So who lost their virginity first?
She did. You did! You lost your virginity first, Cathy. I don't want it back home too much. I know you want it.
Cathy and Claire are at the age when the struggle to be an individual and not part of a double act is very strong, but they're fighting the pull of their genes.
Identical twins reared together sometimes have such close interpersonal interactions that they may artificially perhaps you know, go in different directions just for the sake of it, whereas left to their own devices without those pressures they may follow more similar courses.
But there are some twin data comparing twins reared together, identical and fraternal, that suggests that our likes and dislikes in terms of food preferences and types of art that you like and things that you like to do, activities of daily life, generally show that identical twins are more similar than fraternal twins.
We wanted to discover if Cathy and Claire's urge to be individual was stronger than their genetic pull, so we sent them shopping to find out how great the differences are between their tastes. We asked them to choose an outfit for an outdoor summer party, with no conferring and no cheating.
I kind of went around grabbing a few things. I thought, well, I'll take that dress, because I quite like that, and there's a jacket to go with it. And I really thought, well, I'll give it a go, but I don't think it'll look very good on. And when I put it on, I just loved it. I loved the way it fitted, loved the colour, loved the material and everything. And I couldn't believe, well, I could believe it when Claire picked a very similar sort of outfit. Look, you out? It's fantastic. I mean, basically it's the same sort of outfit, but mine was a dress and hers was a trouser suit. I liked it because it was kind of stylish. And when I put it on, I just loved it. It was kind of slinky, but not too outrageous. I loved the way it fitted, loved the colour, loved the material and everything. It fitted well, and I loved the colour, I loved the material, the texture of the material. I really thought you're going to really think it's fixed, you're going to think we've conferred, but we hadn't.
Choosing similar blue silk outfits might just be a coincidence or a forgotten childhood influence. But there are twins whose uncanny similarities can't be explained in that way. Those identical twins separated at birth and brought up in different families. When they behave alike, it's probably genetic rather than environmental. In part 2, we meet Daphne and Barbara, identical twins who didn't meet each other until they were 40 years old.
Oh, that's brilliant. Cheers. Happy birthday.
Daphne Goodship and Barbara Herbert are identical twins separated at birth and reunited later. They're incredibly rare. Only 68 pairs are known in the world, and they're getting rarer as adoption practice has changed.
Where's my millionaire? Keep me in champagne.
Everything about them fascinates the scientists. Because they have identical genes, it's thought any differences in their behaviour are caused by the differences in their childhood environments, and any similarities are likely to be due to their genes. Daphne and Barbara look, sound and behave alike, but they only met for the first time at 40 after a long search.
It's Barbara that did most of the searching. So she started tracing our mother, who was Finnish. She had us in Hammersmith Hospital and then she had to return to Finland. So I knew where I was born, I wrote to Hammersmith Hospital and it followed on from there, and I discovered that I've got a twin sister 12 minutes older than I am. So what really was strange, because I started searching for my mother, then discovered it wasn't only my mother, it was our mother, it was Daphne's mother as well. So I started searching and making an appeal. But once you start, you can't give up. I wanted to know whether she was alive, well, what family she'd got. I never felt that she'd died.
And eventually, 3 years later, they found one another on platform 4 of King's Cross Station.
Then I think the next thing we were discussing was the children. And it worked out that we both started off with a miscarriage, followed by 2 boys and a girl in that order. And the second sons were born within sort of 3 weeks of one another. So I think that was the first thing. My husband noticed when we first met, he noticed how we used our hands when we talk and sometimes talk behind our hands, but I didn't realise I was doing these things. And he was amazed when he saw Daphne doing them, and he thought, well, goodness, Barbara does exactly the same things. But we really don't think we're that much alike.
Their lives have followed incredibly similar paths. Both left school at 14, both went to work in local government, both married early to men they met at the town hall dance. And this in spite of being brought up very different in character, class and tastes.
We lived in our grandmother's house at Brook Green. We had the ground floor flat. My father was quite a lot older than our mother, so I can't remember what work he'd done. On my birth certificate it says a packer. I was brought up in Luton. My father had a good job at Vauxhall's. He was a metallurgist, so he did have a good job. It was quite a nice area of Luton. It was a nice semi-detached house. We never really went away for holidays very much. There used to be the outing perhaps once a year from the council where my father worked to the seaside, but we never really went away on holidays very much. I had holidays every year, which, you know, some children didn't have. Always nice places like perhaps the Lake District or Cornwall. A lot of sightseeing. We had quite a lot of books in our house.
America leads the world in twin studies. At the University of Minnesota, where all the 68 pairs of separated identical twins are part of a major project, Barbara and Daphne are stars. The testing programme lasts for a week, asks 20,000 questions and covers everything from allergies to heart rate, visual responses to intelligence. Their data is compared with that from non-identical twins. The result is a number called a heritability index. This gives an indication of the statistical probability that shared characteristics and differences are due to genes. A genetic disease like Huntington's has a heritability of 1. Getting divorced, 0.5.
We do know from the work here at Minnesota and elsewhere that identical twins reared apart are just as similar on most traits as identical twins reared together. And so if you happen to be separated from your identical twin at birth and each of you are planted in 2 random homes, the chances are that you will turn out just as similar as you would have turned out had you been reared in the same home together.
And psychology tests, somebody said, write a short sentence. I sat there and I thought, I don't know what to write. He said, no, just anything short. So I put, the cat sat on the mat, and I misspelt it. And I put, the Kaz sat on the mat. Evidently my brain or something was acting quicker, and I put an S, because I suppose the cat and sat. But blow me down, the next day Daphne went in and done exactly the same.
My part of the testing procedure involved having them come to my laboratory, and among other things, we took photographs of them, and the standard procedure was to stand them side by side and get headshots, first with a serious look and then with a smiling look. With most people, it's hard to get a natural smiling look. With Barbara and Daphne, it was impossible to get a serious look because they were gigglers. We naturally asked them about their backgrounds and their adoptive families, and the impression I got from both of them was that each had happened to grow up in families that were rather serious people, not given to joking and laughter, rather doer people, and neither one had ever known anyone as giggly and as given to humor and delight as they were until they met each other.
Right.
The work done with Daphne and Barbara and all the other identical twins reared apart has led the Minnesota scientists to the extraordinary conclusion that there is a strong genetic component to happiness. No one suggests there is a single gene for it. Personality and mood are very complex, so scientists are only starting to unpick the links between certain neurotransmitters and mood.
Oh, it goes through, all right. I know. It's marvellous, isn't it?
However, researchers are turning up unexpected results that surprise even them.
One thing, however, we have discovered, which seems to be it's an important psychological trait, but it is not genetically influenced, is who you fall in love with. Who it is that inspires romantic infatuation. We began wondering about what factors determine mate choice. And because we had measures on all these twins and many of their spouses, we thought, well, let's begin by looking at identical twins.
Out in the West Texas town of El Paso, I fell in love with a Mexican girl.
Tom and Ted Lagarde, identical twin country and western singers, were a perfect textbook case for the study.
It's unbelievable how Ted could fall in love with Sharon and I fall in love with Diane, and both the women are opposite ends of the spectrum. They have nothing in common, nothing, totally different.
You've met her. They're, by physical appearances, I think you can tell there's quite a bit of difference, just starting there. She's 6 feet tall, I'm 5'3". She's blonde, I'm brunette.
Yeah, there's all these differences going on, in hair color and where we were born, but it's fun.
One night a wild young cowboy came in, wild as a West Texas wind.
Tom and Ted married in a double wedding in 1962. Ted married Sharon, who he'd met when she was a gawky 12-year-old schoolgirl. 34 years later, they are still happily married.
When she got the braces of her teeth, she started to blossom, you know. I thought, oh, whew, she's pretty cute, you know. And then the emotions started to come into play, and the love bug, you know.
I'd always been in love with him, and I'd kept it a secret for many, many years because, I don't know, it was a private thing to me. And I'd dated other fellas and had always compared them to Ted. It was never that right special feeling that I had when I was around him.
The other twin, Tom, had a different story. At the double wedding, he'd married Shirley. That lasted 10 years. Then there was Janice. That lasted 7 years. But number 3 was different. 20 years earlier, while on the road, he'd bumped into Diane LeCluet, soon to become Miss Louisiana, 1960.
And I saw this Cajun beauty stand beside the swimming pool. I looked at her and I thought, man, that is some woman. Because I was pretty young and frisky, you know what I mean? So I walked straight up to her, grabbed her, and slapped a kiss on her. And I said, one of these days I'm going to marry you.
Years, 20 years passed. And he married, and I married.
I got married and divorced. And we were playing the Texas State Fair in 1980.
I could almost cry thinking about it because I thought about this man for 20 years. Wondered where was Tom? What happened to the love of my life?
And I called her up and I said, do you know who this is? And she said, yeah, this is the love of my life. I said, well, get your ass up here to Dallas.
And so 3 months later, we got divorced from the people we were married to, and we were married. And that has been now 15 years. So that's how I met him.
If our romantic dreams were right, and there was a perfect person out there, one who matches us in every way, the partners of identical twins should be very alike as well.
And what we found was that the spouses of identical twins are no more alike than the spouses of fraternal twins, and very little more alike than random men or women of the same age.
You could not have traveled the world and found 2 women that are totally different. It's just why they would choose different type of women. I mean, they're evidently their likes, their attractions, and that feel are just totally opposite.
Tom needs someone just right for him, and so he picked Diane, and that's important. And she picked him, and that's important. They must have known what was the right thing to do there.
I am more of a kind of an outgoing person. She's very, very religious and very into the Mormon church and does a lot of converting. And I am a religious, but I kind of a private religious type person. And I like to have a drink now and then. I hope that's not too bad, but I do.
We were forced to the conclusion that mate choice for most people is determined neither by characteristics of the chooser nor characteristics of the chosen. It's a kind of a random event. As the poets have always said, it depends on whom you happen to be standing next to when Cupid's arrow strikes.
Though the 2 wives disagree on just about everything else, there is one subject where they're in agreement.
You have to understand the bond that twins have and the love that they have for each other, and it's beyond a regular brotherly love.
The love that they have for each other, no man can put us under, believe you me.
One little kiss and Felina.
Twin studies are changing the way we think about everything, from disease and obesity to intelligence and the family. But it's in the areas of child development and the consequent social policy that the implications for everyone are the most profound. Take language acquisition. It's long been accepted that the development of language is environmental. Mastering it is a crucial watershed for young children. These 4-year-olds have passed it and can express themselves pretty clearly.
That you want to race with?
It's a toy and I don't fit in it because I'm too big and I can't fit. And they're tiny cars and they go no ways. The wheels turn.
But some children don't develop language properly. A recent twin study has suggested that there may be a genetic component to a common childhood speech disorder. Craig and Ryan Ball are also 4. bright, intelligent, identical twins, living with their sister Hayley and their parents in Sidcup. They're competitive and demanding, which is perfectly normal.
Craig, let him share that, please. Yeah, well, you have a little turn here, just let him share it, please. Yeah, I'll swap him with this one.
The problem is their speech, which is not normal. It's almost impossible to understand what they're saying. They're not using a mysterious twins language. About 1 in 50 children, both twins and non-twins, share their particular type of speech disorder. One of the usual reasons given for delay in acquiring speech and language is lack of focused parental attention, something twins obviously are more likely to suffer from than single children.
No, not like that.
Dorothy Bishop is a neuropsychologist at Cambridge University, specialising in children's language development. We showed her the tapes of Craig and Ryan reading with their mother.
Right, what's this one, Ryan?
Probably giraffe.
And
this one?
Hippo.
What's this one? Rhinoceros. What's this one?
If you actually measure how much parents talk to twins, for instance, you find that the poor mother is talking just as much as a mother of a single-born child, but of course she can't talk to both of them at the same time, so she's continually having to switch attention. And with boys like this who are very keen to get her attention, she may be pulled from one to the other, or she may ask one a question and the other one answers.
What is it, Ryan? Saw. Good boy.
Dorothy Bishop ran a twin study looking at identical and non-identical twins where at least one had a speech problem, and the results are most surprising. The problem appears to have nothing to do with your mother or lack of undivided attention. It appears to be genetic.
Why is it that it's the identical twins that seem to both have the problem and the non-identical twins, it's often just one of them? It can't just be that they're growing up together and there's something about the home environment, because it's very, very striking when you come across a pair of non-identical twins who have so many things in common in terms of who they're talking to at home and what the family background is like. And yet there's one there who's as unintelligible as the children we saw on the video, and the other one is talking entirely normally. It forces you to realise that there's likely to be some genetic basis to the disorder. And one has to beware of being over simple-minded about this and just thinking, oh, there's a gene for language disorder. It's more likely that there are genetic effects on how the brain develops very early on that might just lead to certain areas of the brain not being as optimally connected up as they should be, so that you just have a brain that's less well geared up for perhaps processing rapidly changing sounds, which is something we know is very important for speech and language development.
But nobody's singing.
Research like this, and the work on identical twins reared apart, now suggests that the family, long held by scientists and politicians alike to be crucial in the development of the individual, may not be quite as important as we thought. Barbara and Daphne are vital laboratory material. With most of their lives spent apart, they find they now often do the same thing at the same time. So what does that say about the influence of the family environment?
I said, oh, I'm just doing a chilli. And Daphne said, well, I'm just cooking a chilli. I said, well, I got mine from such and such book. So have I. So we were cooking the same. And these things happen quite often. We bought almost identical dresses before Christmas. I know this can happen to people that have grown up together, but when you've never grown up together and not quite sure everybody's taste, it seems strange that you're going to choose the same things time after time and read the same book. We chose the same book within a quarter of an hour of each other.
One of the implications of the fact that identical twins reared apart are just as similar as those reared together is this surprising fact that being reared together in the same home by the same parents does not tend to make people more alike. It makes them more alike as children, but once they leave home and go off on their own as adults, unrelated children, for example, adopted children reared by the same parents, when they grow up, are no more alike than random pairs of people.
The studies that have been done now involve perhaps hundreds of thousands of twin pairs in many, many different countries by many different researchers, and one really consistent finding that is coming out is that one can find very little evidence for the importance of family environment in influencing behaviour. This is quite counter to theory that has been popular amongst sociologists and educational psychologists.
There are a lot of really awful parents, and their awfulness is manifested in producing awful children. But most parents in the middle are interchangeable. Most parents do the basic job of parenting well enough. Both parents give the child the opportunity for its genetic steersman to find the right kind of environment, to find the right sorts of experiences that are compatible with the genetic tendencies.
For years, parents have been under pressure to provide perfect home environments to produce perfect children. This is an unrealistic ideal. We're made up of a mixture of genes and environment. A better environment will boost our capabilities, but it seems there are genetic limitations. We can't all make it to the top, but this is hard to accept in relation to intelligence.
Given the environments that we do provide, there are important genetic influences that make some people get a better genetic hand than others. And if you say if we just tackle the hottest one of all, genetic influence on what we call cognitive abilities, that is mental abilities, thinking and reasoning. There's been dozens of twin studies. Tens of thousands of pairs of twins have literally been studied for mental abilities. They all consistently point to genetic influence, as do adoption studies, as do new twin studies of twins reared apart. All the data converge on very substantial genetic influence.
Our IQs are very similar. There's only about 1 point difference. The first time we went it was 108, 109, and the second time it increased to about 118 and 119. So basically there's always been that 1 point difference.
And in my laboratory, the computer gave them an IQ test, so there was no administrator at all. The computer tested them and read out their score, so that we have very accurate measures of intellectual ability on all these twins reared apart. And what we have found is a very high correlation of about 0.75, which means that about 3/4 of the variation in IQ from pair to pair of these identical twins reared apart is due to their genetic similarity.
In our modern society, intelligence has become increasingly important. People can in fact succeed and fail largely on intelligence. We know from twin studies and other kinds of studies that intelligence is reasonably inheritable, that more intelligent parents tend to have more intelligent children, at least as we measure intelligence. And I think that's, and I think people have great concerns about that.
The concerns lie with a sense of unfairness and the fear of prejudice that could result from labelling people. And the whole problem of what the IQ test is actually measuring remains controversial. But much as we may wish it otherwise, the distribution of intelligence is not equal through any population.
I think that if you improve the environment for everyone, differences will remain. I mean, we all have different genetic material. But let me give you a good example of that. People in Japan are about 6 or 7 inches taller now than the same Japanese people, the population was, say, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. The change is really affluence and diet. The change is the environment. The genetic potential was always there, but now, because the environment has changed, all Japanese people, or at least all people who have this better environment, can in fact be improved. It doesn't mean it makes them all the same height. It just makes them all taller.
It bears out what racehorse breeders have known for years, that genes on their own are not enough. Racehorses are bred specifically for their winning genes. But every trainer knows that it's crucial not to neglect their environment. The grooming, pampering, watering, feeding and general cherishing is not just sentiment, it's to make them run faster and win more races. But what's easy to accept in animals feels very disturbing when applied to humans. For science in this area has a terrible history.
behavioral genetics lives in the shadow of eugenics. In the 1920s, the eugenic movement in the US and the UK peaked with many attempts to improve the genetic material of the population. And in particular, there were attempts to either limit the reproduction of people deemed having inferior genetic material, or keep people out of a country and deemed to having inferior genetic material. So we had sterilization, we had immigration laws, and those kinds of things discriminated against people. But the real horrors of the extremes of eugenics came with Nazism, when in fact the Nazis first started with sterilization of people with disabilities, then euthanasia of people with disabilities, and finally the Holocaust, killing more than 6 million people whose lives were defined as not worth living because they were not of the right blood. I think that kind of behavioral eugenics run wild really has left a shadow that behavioral genetics has had to live in for the last certainly 20 or 30 years post-World War II.
Today's behavioural geneticists must tread very carefully indeed because of these deep-rooted fears. But slowly and surely, there is a shift towards accepting that studying the genetic side of our health and behaviour can bring medical and social benefits. Twin studies are in the forefront of this. One of the oldest is here at Louisville, Kentucky, where since the 1950s, thousands of pairs of twins have been weighed and measured throughout their lives. One of the most exciting current research projects is unravelling the various causes of obesity, an increasing problem in the Western world.
All of our theories of obesity and weight gain are really environmental theories until recently. But twin studies suggest that there's almost as much genetic influence on weight as there is on height. And of course, it doesn't mean that you can't change your weight. It just means that people differ in the population in weight. They obviously differ. There's a lot of environmental variation. I mean, some people are on diets at a particular time, some aren't. But the vast majority of those differences have to do with genetic differences, and it's been twin studies leading the way on that. That identical twins are about 70–80% similar, and fraternal twins are only 40 or 50% similar for obesity.
If you went to the same school, who do you think would be the one?
Adam Matheny has been following the Louisville twins for the last 28 years, watching them grow from children into adults. He sees them every year and charts their development.
I'd be the one getting in trouble because I was always so bossy. I'd be the one that always gets beat up.
Obesity is one of the areas of his work.
Given the tendency for some people to gain weight more easily than others, and this is particularly true of, say, females compared with males, then you have a great deal of food stuff available. Then you can find that some people are fulfilling their potential for being like enormous blimps given their height. And it's very difficult to make people fat if you're on a starvation diet of 500 grams or 500 calories per day. But once you're released from those conditions, people start to sort themselves out again on the basis of their genetic heritage.
Clearly, at the level of the individual, it doesn't mean you're programmed to be fat. It's just that there's a strong genetic propensity, and other things being equal, as they often are during our lives, it's going to be a tougher battle for you to be thin than someone else.
So it's not a level playing field, and it's crucial how you play the game.
I think there's been a negative view of fatness and overweight in our society for at least the last 50 or 60 years. And the explanations were usually social or psychological. It was your fault, you ate too much, you couldn't control yourself. It was almost, and this goes back a long time to the notion of gluttony, that people were engaged in the sin of gluttony. Now we're beginning to think more and more of the gene for gluttony.
Back when environmentalism ruled, it was a rather passive view of the environment. It's like the child's bagatelle game in which a ball just comes down through these pins and you don't have any control over it. Genetics research, and especially twin studies, have been very important in changing that to a more active view, like a pinball machine, where you have levers that allow you to control the course of that metal ball coming down through the pins. We're actively involved in our environment. We select environments, and when we're in them, we modify them, and when we can't find them, we create them.
The toddler who is adventurous and exploratory is going to have a series of different experiences that his more timid or sedentary sibling, when they get to school and start playing with the children outside, their genetic characteristics, again, will elicit different responses, and they will become, as they grow up, more and more able to seek out those kinds of environments and experiences that are compatible with their genetic nature.
There's good evidence that throughout the lifespan, from infancy to childhood to adolescence to young adulthood to middle-aged, genetic influence increases. Identical twins become more similar a bit, but fraternal twins become less similar throughout life. And that suggests increasing genetic influence, but it's particularly important, that finding, because it's counterintuitive. Most people think, like Shakespeare, that the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune accumulate during life, so that we become increasingly more subject to our experiences, illnesses, accidents, whatever. But the genetic data suggests the reverse, that as we go through life, if anything, genetic influences increase. But the way I like to think about why identical twins become more similar throughout life is that it may be that early genetic propensities, influences, just nudge us in one direction rather than another. And those little differences early on become increasingly greater differences later in life. Someone once said that the older I get, the more I become who I am.
This new and extraordinary view has evolved as twins have been studied over the last 30 years. Something profoundly strange seems to be emerging. It appears there's a genetic influence over our major life events. Can this really be because people's genes push them to behave in certain ways?
Psychiatrists have tried to catalogue in order to quantify the insults to which people are subjected during life, and include all of the usual things like losing one's job, one's marriage breaking up, going broke, having a motor car accident, those sorts of things. And the assumption always is that these really are just acts of God that are being thrown at one, but in fact you can show that for a very large proportion of these, in fact, identical twins have a much more similar experience than non-identical twins. So even the assumption that bad luck is just bad luck, as opposed to something that perhaps you set yourself up for, is not a safe one.
If that's the case, then it's not so surprising it shows genetic influence. If you're having a lot of conflicts with your family or at work and you lose your job because of you're always being angry with people, I mean, is it so implausible to think that genetic factors might be involved in that? So this has really revolutionized the way we think about the environment.
It's also revolutionised the way we think about our genes and completely changed the way we look at the complex forces which make us the people we are. Twin studies show that we're not puppets dancing on genetic strings, neither are we prisoners of our environment. It's a subtle and ever-changing balance of power between the two.
I think there has been a pendulum of interest in genetics that's swung back and forth between nature and nurture over the years. Now, my hope is that the swings have become less violent, and perhaps the pendulum will come to rest in the middle between nature and nurture. The pendulum belongs in the middle because that's where the data says it belongs. Both genetic and environmental factors are important. But it's nature and nurture, and let's get on with the more complex task of understanding how both nature and nurture work together in the development of these complex dimensions and disorders.
And at last, here I am on the hill of overlooking El Paso. I can see Rosa's Cantina below. From out of nowhere, Felina has found me, kissing my cheek as she kneels by my side. Cradled by two loving arms that I died for, one little kiss and Felina. Good.